There's a magnet in that box, and that box is showing you what that magnetic field looks like. Now, if you imagine those field lines as little paddles, and when those little paddles hit another magnet, it influences the other magnet. There's one on that ping pong ball right there. Its motion's creating an electromagnetic field that makes power. Does this solve the energy crisis if we put speakers on buildings? No. It can't solve the learning crisis. What you're seeing is the projection if you were to look down the poles of a magnet right there. That forms that pattern. We're going to use that later. Now, if you rotate the magnet, then you see the poles of the magnet. That's what the two sides are. Magnets are just a perturbation of the field in the form of a torus. You know it as a donut. They knew it as a bowl. The poles spin in two opposing directions. One pole is from the center out. This is centrifugal, growth force. The other is outside to in. This is centripetal, like a hurricane. Together, these form a perfect balanced circle as they rotate, illustrated perfectly in the yin-yang. This is the inward-outward breath of the universe. Those lines that you're seeing are actually an interference pattern. It's like the peaks and the valleys of the field forming those little paddles. And when you look at the field straight, you see the motion around. It's actually illustrated perfectly in the Ionic columns from ancient Greece. Two counter rotations flowing around the center. Makes you wonder where Tesla got his ideas for the Tesla coil. Tesla coil works by resonating a primary coil with a secondary coil. You do this, it amplifies the signal like getting a microphone too close to a speaker, creating crazy electricity. It does this because of harmonics. Sound works exactly the same. They're linked by proportional geometry. This is the division or harmony of spheres. A harmonious relationship is how pretty much everything in nature actually works. We gave it meaning and therefore can manipulate it with math. The invisible world of waves and the physical world of geometry are linked through you. If all things are the same thing, it's pretty easy to create stuff, right? We used to learn this just by looking at those. The building's literally the book. Now you and your kids are locked in one of these for 4 years and 6 figures. What you're looking at up here is a beetle shell. It's called the elytron. And if you did not know, beetles levitate. They don't fly, they levitate. Watch the wizardry of the beetle. So a moth flies exactly how you would expect, like it swims through the air. Same with flies, they fly horizontally. The beetle flaps out his levitators, jumps in the air, and hopes for the best. You don't really notice it because it happens really fast. But when they are about to take off, they flap out the elytra. Moth wings move in a wave, and fly wings move up and down. But beetle wings move side to side just to change the rotational direction that they're going. The elytra react to electromagnetic fields as small as the one that your body produces because of these guys. They're literally little vortex generators inside the shell. Inside the shell are little resonator cavities. A pulse in the cavity creates a wave that can be directed. In our antennas, we direct the beam by delaying the pulse, but the beetle has a shell that's already curved. When you face them together downwards, they create a reflection back up. This was first discovered by Viktor Grebennikov. He studied these beetles and then glued some of their wings to the bottom of a platform and created a levitating platform. You have to lay it out in a certain pattern, but he even had controls on the footboard like a 3D scooter. Now, if you're observant, you might see where he got his inspiration for this little device. Who learned that one in school? You're not ready for this one. We're in Avatar world at this point. This is a plant talking to another plant. This one's probably not saying anything good because the caterpillar's eating it, but a team of researchers used some creative fluorescent lighting and some microscopes to watch this all happen. The results of this are beautiful. Among other things they measured if a plant gets damaged, what happens then to, and sure enough, they communicate pretty much anything that comes in contact with them. They do this with glutamate. Kind of like how our body communicates with us with chemicals that get translated into feelings. You can even see it going through the channels in the cells. That is wild. But it's not just with damage, it's with a variety of things. Even touching the plants can cause them to glow. The electromagnetic field of a plant also responds to damage, and even bees.
Flying causes them to lose electrons. As a bee approaches a flower, the charged fields around the flower and the bee interact, and the sound changes.
The bee has a static charge from flying, and the plant is grounded, so it has negative, so the pollen just jumps to the bee. Trees also have a similar method of communication, except they use a middleman, the mycelium network, or the fungus, which we only see the fruit of. They cluster in these nodes to create a tree internet. The fungus on the bark and the moss and even the other plants around are connected to form a giant internet of plants. So the universe looks like that, nebulas look like this, the earth looks like this, we look like that, and drink water looks like this, to eat the plants that look like that, to feed our brain that looks like this, so that when we're done experiencing all of it, that can decompose us and return us to this. That is a freezing ball of water, and I'm going to use it to explain the entire planet. Now, this is very cool, but if you watch very carefully, there's a hidden code within these bubbles. That code is the key to how all things in nature operate, how we observe them. Let me explain. If we look at a freezing pond or a snowflake, they freeze the same way. At their core, they are scale invariant. It doesn't matter what size they are. If we put a bubble on a speaker, we can use that to explain how these clouds form on this mountain. If I change the frequency of that bubble, I can use it to explain these clouds. But this is only a small piece of the puzzle. I can also explain how the winds work on Earth because Earth is a giant bubble that spins. When it spins, it creates these air currents. You can also see these in the ocean. All of this works whether it's a bubble or the ocean. It's scale invariant. So let's look at why. The interaction of these bubbles creates a pattern. If we take this bubble and then we draw more bubbles from the center of that bubble and keep going out, we get this particular shape. From this shape, we can create all shapes, but let's look at a hexagon. A hexagon we see in bubbles when they get smushed together. But we also see this in molecules. Molecules form stuff that life can use to build more stuff. In the mineral kingdom, this is how lava pools and crystals form. They use this because it's very structurally sound. If crystals on an ice ball can teach you all of that, then maybe education should be a little more interesting than sitting in a classroom watching a whiteboard. When you slice fruits or vegetables the right way, they make the same shapes that sound makes. That is a pattern you'll see if you put a dish of water on a speaker. The same pattern you see in that melon can be recreated with a vibration at around 12 hertz. So if that frequency makes the shape, can we reverse the shape to get the frequency? Kind of. That one's split into fours because the wave goes up and down 4 times in one cycle. Put the ends of the wave together, then you have your circular radial harmonics that you see in the water. That one would be 5, and that one would be 6. If you put drops of oil in the water, that pattern will organize the oil drops. With the right frequency, you can replicate the same pattern that DNA makes when viewed from the top down. And if you put it in the freezer while it's making these patterns, you can freeze the shape. So here's my question. Does this little seed have the code to freeze watermelon.mp3 in reality? China's actually researching this to increase crop yields, up to 30% more in some cases. This one found a frequency that could increase the rate of photosynthesis in plants. Let's go deep for a second though. Almost every single ancient culture had beings that came and gave the gifts of civilization and agriculture. Here's the thing, you go to enough of these places, you start to see flowers everywhere. Instead of decorations that were inspired by nature, could they instead be details on how to replicate these things using the language of sonic geometry? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I am sorry, but this is an obsession of mine. Vibration is the same whether it's electromagnetics or sound. They're intricately linked. Color. It's weird. Let's figure it out. So Mr. Pete here has a red, green, and blue light combining into purple. When he puts that piece of paper in front of those lights, it refracts through the cracks to create RGB, and the shadow of that little stick creates CMY. RGB is what your phone uses to make color, and CMY is what printers use to make color. CMY is cyan, magenta, and yellow. It's used for printing because when you separate those layers out, you can use a printer to print in layers to create the image, kind of like what he's done here with this photo. You can see the exact parts of the photos that contain magenta, cyan, and yellow. Colors are only visible with light, obviously. Your eyes see them differently through different filters, like the atmosphere or the ocean. This is very important for all life. Those different colored shirts manipulate heat differently. If you look closely, that dark green is even hotter than the black shirt. That is because green is the perfect phi ratio in the visible color spectrum. And as we know, the golden ratio is very easy to see in plants. But what does it mean? In very simple terms, green is the most energetically dense form of light. It's like jet fuel versus diesel. If you look at the prism experiment, I'm sure everyone's seen this, how light refracts through a triangular prism. That's how rainbows are formed. But you only get those triangles from the spheres of raindrops. They triangulate that color to your eyes. If you pass light through a crystal sphere, you can see this in action. If you use a sphere of any diameter, it always follows the phi ratio for the reflection angles. And for those that know, I'm just going to leave this one right here for you. Now, if we look up the elements that make up every single thing, they all have a color. It's because everything is fundamentally light, and the orbitals of these atoms are constantly reflecting light at different angles depending on how energetically charged they are. That's how they used to make the colors in old neon signs, by combining these elements. And why the divergent sciences and esoteric circles use that periodic table. Quantum science is now catching up to this with quasi-crystals, and you can see the phi ratio in those as well. You take a music note and move it up enough octaves, you get its corresponding color in the light spectrum. This is one of the reasons why electronic music is so immersive, because they are tied together. Every time that first segment, the slow arm, goes around in a circle, the second faster arm goes around pi times, or 3.14 times. You know what's really weird about this? It will never draw the same path ever. That is an irrational number. They never rationalize into a number. It's infinite. That pattern it makes is even more important. It may be mesmerizing because it's the pattern that we see everywhere in nature. It's the pattern of magnetism. It's the pattern of the golden ratio. Nature employs this. You may be wondering how those two are linked. Well, it's circles. Everything is simply circles. Any size circle's circumference divided by the diameter will get pi every time. Watch this. One more circle from the middle to the edge. The last circle just on the edge of the original circle. If our original circle is a crystal sphere and we shine a light through it, the rainbow it produces from red to red is phi, the golden ratio. This is some matrix source code magic right here. That's the eye from all the symbols. Cat's out of the bag. It's that eye right there. Here's why. Within that eye, you get the binary sequence. That is how cells divide. The middle measurement is the division of the cube. It literally defines 3D space. It's the key to 3D. The corner to corner measurement, golden ratio. All of the things are just circles, a projection of circles. If you place a bunch of circles, the golden ratio, apart from each other and get them to spin, you're going to recognize a lot of patterns. It's called the harmony of the spheres, and Johannes Kepler used it a while ago to pretty accurately predict the orbits of the planets in the solar system. There are actually no real straight lines other than the center point from one circle to the center point of another circle. That's where you get the approximations of straight lines. But in certain frames, they appear to be straight lines. So what's up with the golden ratio? Well, if you confine the golden ratio to a cube, then it creates a sphere. If we make a radiograph, kind of like a world map out of that sphere, it hits the radiograph in 3 important points, making a triangle. And if you have geometrics, you know that triangles are pretty much how we tell time. In math, the golden ratio creates a Fibonacci sequence, and geometrically it looks like that. Sister pattern is the binary template, which creates the 3D, the things you see. Binary is how cells divide. It's literally required for life. So that math we process through geometry over time creates the experience that you watch. But who's the watcher? You ever seen one of these? It's called Nightmare Tornado. Other people refer to it as a fire devil. But it is the coolest illustration of how a vortex pulls in a lot of energy and then focuses that energy up into a tube, a spiraling tube. It's much nicer cousin the water spout does this and actually transports water from a body of water into the atmosphere. The vortex actually has layers. There's an outer layer that you see, but the inner layer can transport things faster than the outer layer. The outer layer acts like a protective sheath for the inner layer. In college, we had to build one of these things called a vortex tube. Air goes into this tube and starts to spin. As it spins, it heats up. When it reaches the end of the tube, there's a pyramid at the end of the tube that separates the hot air from the cold air, and the cold air goes back through the vortex out the other end. They're used in heating and air conditioning. Vortex is the most dynamically stable shape in the entire universe. It can become disconnected and still retain the vortex shape. But when two of them connect, something really magical happens. They intertwine with each other, forming a connector tube from 2 points. Quantum particles connected with a vortex. Galaxies connected with a vortex. This is our local group of stars we can see with our eyes in the sky. Spins in the galaxy. When it spins, solar plasma connects them as we spin around the Milky Way. So, is this the future of communication if we learn how to, manipulate the vortex? Time is a construct, right? How is it constructed? Nobody can tell me. So let's use the balls of our eyes and look at phi. Phi is the QR code your brain uses to process proportion. Since we see it on the biggest scales to the smallest scales, this must have something to do with it. But if you're not convinced, whales use this shape to trap fish, and then they eat them. Close your fist. The only way you can do this is because your fingers are the right ratio to close. This thing is also in your arm and your heart and your brain. The end of that spiral points directly at the cerebellum. The cerebellum processes spatial awareness, processes motor functions, or the relation of you to other things through time. You will see this ratio and the spiral in almost everything in nature, including the Earth's magnetic field. Prove it. Let's look at the magnetic field lines of a sphere. What do you know? It is the golden ratio. If we look at it from the top down, those lines will form harmonics, or how our ears perceive music beautifully. It is widely used in architecture, specifically the most famous, beautiful, and old buildings we have. It is called the golden ratio because on the color spectrum, it spirals into yellow gold. Its proportion and balance are used in some of the greatest works of art that we have, including this guy. On the left, the Fibonacci rectangle splits Vitruvius at the navel, defines his head and his torso. The image on the right is the same ratio using spheres. This is how music works. Keys on the piano are calculated this way, as well as the parts on Vitruvius's body. Let's go even older into ancient traditions. What they're holding there is a pine cone. The pine cone has this spiral and ratio inside of it as well. The deities gift humans with this knowledge to expand their perception of the natural world and how it works through time. Now the spiral makes more sense. Every revolution of that hand spins the spiral 1 hour depending on the planetary gears that are in the watch. Now when you look at a watch, you know what the spring inside of it actually does. You ready for this? This is the Mandelbrot set. The father of fractals, the Mandel dad. Every single time you zoom in on this fractal, it zooms into a Julia set, which is another fractal. The Julia set is in a constant state of integration and disintegration, and it's also a vortex when you plot it in 3D. The Mandelbrot is in the shape of a cardioid. It's a very important shape in mathematics, and it's seen in architecture and in technology like microphones, as well as the optics of spheres. It's called collimation. Antennas use this to transmit signals. Cardioid focuses the signal into a point, makes it more efficient to transmit to another antenna. But when you freeze that, it looks suspiciously like the Egyptian lotus. There are no coincidences. The branches of the Mandelbrot fractal are Sierpinski fractals. It's the cheat code to lightning. When you rotate the Mandelbrot set and connect it to itself, it creates the Koch snowflake, which is another fractal. If you map the X and the Y coordinates to the left and the right speaker, then the Mandelbrot set plays harmonic tones. Now that is cool, but what's even cooler is if you zoom into the fractal, it adds harmonics, which means as the fractal gets more complex, the sound gets more complex, but stays harmonic at the same time. Let's make it 3D. If you make it 3D, it looks like trees or broccoli or a whole bunch of nature. If you just let it run and do its thing, it'll create shapes that you've probably seen before because they're very structurally sound. In 1 minute, one fractal has linked the physics of sound and light and optics and mathematics and engineering and architecture. How does it do this while connecting to nature? That's because all things are just one thing. You just learned them separately. This whole video is a chapter out of my new book, Geometrics. We dive deep into fractals because they tell us a lot about the world and history and engineering and all kinds of stuff. This book is a part of my series on holistic, esoteric education. Instead of compartmentalizing education into one subject for one thing, this teaches it in a holistic way that makes it relate to everything else. The biggest breakthroughs in science, tech are not going to be AI. They're going to be from water. You see what's happening to that slow-mo? You see the light behind that water droplet? Water reveals the patterns of light and frequency. A frequency through water can show you all the details of that frequency. That's a cymatic pattern. For example, this shape creates the vector equilibrium, one of the most stable shapes in the universe. Bees love the thing. Everything in nature uses vibration in some way. That's just a bowl of water in the woods reflecting the sounds of nature. That's just a bucket of water reflecting the sounds of construction. The problem is, most of us learn the behavior of waves in 2D when it's actually a 3D phenomenon. Sound looks more like that traveling through the air. The cymatic is a frozen cross-section of that bubble through time. What's even crazier is we can calculate the pattern that the sound is going to make. The biggest sine wave up there is the fundamental. All of the smaller waves are harmonics that add to the tone of that fundamental sound. If you combine all of them, you get the sound your ears perceive. In this case, all of those are harmonics, which means they sound good with the fundamental, so it creates a square wave. Now imagine that circle as a dish of water on a speaker. The pattern it's drawing happens in a fraction of a second to produce the cymatic image that we see. All of it is geometry and math. Using a cymoscope, we can find the resonance of anything. This technology was pioneered by John Stuart Reid. Anthony Holland is taking this technology even further by trying to shatter cancer cells using just sound. Cymatics has the potential to link all disciplines. This is the E8 lattice. It's a mathematical theory attempting to explain everything. That is an ancient Hindu temple. This is where we were, and it's where we're going. And it's all based on shapes and sound, something you learn as a child. Somebody a long time ago knew about this and that and this and pass it off as magic. I'm fully convinced. For real, someone was probably sitting on a cliff, looked out at that, and was probably like, that's all it is. That's all it is. It's just waves. I'm now a wizard. For real. Telekinesis, it's sonic levitation. You can do it with energy too. And it makes you can trap particles in a tube with just sound. You can do this with a laser too. Same concept, except with the laser, you can literally break the molecular bonds of metal and rock. If the wizard knew what the laser was going through, he could bend it like a Jedi. Telepathy. Got it. That's how we transmit all data anywhere. This is how radio stations work. Exactly. Wizardry. Moses with the snake staff. Moses was a wizard. We probably just had knew about electricity, put it through some ball bearings in some oil, made it crawl like a snake. Ferrofluid, you can make it dance. Same concept. It looks like magic, dude. It looks like magic because it kind of is. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I can't remember who said that, but you show me that 1,000 years ago, I'd be like, wizard, he knows about it. He knows everything. He knows it all. Then you can record it in these things and then show and teach other people your wizardry. First capitalist ever was a wizard. Now you got to sit in one of these and learn the boring way. This video is 1 minute long. If you know everything about water that I'm about to show you in this video, I'll buy you anything you want off the dollar menu. Let's go. This is an atmospheric water generator. It pulls the water from the air so that you can drink it. That's what it looks like commercially, and you can put one of these anywhere in your home. You don't need a well. You just plug it in, and it pulls water from the air. Cactus needles work the same way in the desert. We can put water into the air by hitting it with ultrasonic vibration, and it creates mist. That mist eventually falls down from the sky in rain that gets caught in these Hindu stepwells, which are many thousands of years old. Sometimes the Indus even put lingams in the river to purify the water. When light passes through little water droplets, it can create the entire spectrum of color. But the deeper you go into water, the more color it filters out. In some parts of the world, they put these poles in the ground, and water condenses along those poles and freezes at high altitude. They do this to store water for droughts or for farming, irrigation, or just to cool off. Some places are even reviving deserts this way. There's a similar phenomenon underwater called a brinacle, and it can freeze these poor little starfish right in their tracks. The currents under the water make it look like an ice tornado. Water responds to frequency. Frequency bends moving water into crazy shapes, but standing water can organize different materials within it. It's a relatively new field of study called cymatics. It is unveiling the interaction between frequency and matter and relating that in terms of geometry. You can see this in frozen cymatics. Now, Veda Austin's work is probably my favorite thing in this whole video. Exposing an image to some water in a glass petri dish and then partially freezing that water will cause the water to mimic the image. Water is amazing. And you are water, so you're amazing. This kind of shocked me. Water has this tendency to mirror whatever it's exposed to in its liquid crystal state. So if you show it an image and then you put it in the freezer, right before it completely solidifies, it will reflect back to you the image that you showed it. Initially, I thought this was probably a Jesus in the toast phenomenon, but clearly we have a ton of examples of this working. This is deep. Different types of water freeze differently. Water from a spring looks different than rainwater. Filtered water looks like it went through the filter, and tap water looks... This is wild. This is a singing bowl. Left image was before the singing bowl. Right image after that. They look the same. Left image, spring water looking natural like a leaf. Right image, microwave water. So I left something out of this image. This is what the water looked like when it was frozen. The water was not exposed to that image or the one over there, though. It was only exposed to Veda's thoughts. She was literally just thinking of a medieval helmet. So what exactly is going on here? We kind of don't understand, really. We do know that water reflects frequency at an extreme level. You can see harmonics in water droplets. You can see rainbows and the entire visible light spectrum through a water droplet. In a way, it's kind of a window into the unseen. Even the forces of nature and their respective patterns geometrically can be seen when we look at things like vortexes. And I've seen a lot of cymatics and a lot of interesting frozen frequencies, but if you want to explore all of this, Veda has a brand new book. She was kind enough to send it to me. It's literally hundreds of pages of evidence of this happening. She shows you the technique. It's a very interesting read. We're probably going to be able to talk to animals this year. Yeah, the Earth Species Project is using AI to decode animal language. So they made models of words and their associations of like star to universe and star to like a famous person. And then it makes one of these. The 10,000 most used words in a language get made into a model. The coolest part, I thought, is that they all look almost exactly the same, which ironically looks like a backwards 16th note. So they use the same technique on animals and listen to them when they communicate. And then they make a model like one of these. It's then matched with the English model or whatever language you speak and then translated back to you. Sick. But there's another layer. You can only understand things because of geometry, even words. In cymatics, noise is chaos, pattern is order. An ordered sound creates symmetry in the folds of a wave. And then that pattern means something, like the vowels you see up there. Those individual geometries can then be understood by your brain. You can then form those into words or harmony in music. It's all the same. It's even in your DNA. I just want to talk to my dog, and hopefully if we can find some harmony with AI, we can talk to these guys. I'm sure you know dolphins communicate using sonar, but a cross-section of that sonar is a cymatic pattern, like this. That's their letters. That's how they write. Now, what I'm about to show you is going to blow your fucking mind. This is the cymatic pattern of a dolphin communicating with its trainer. This is a frozen cross-section of that. Now, if we enhance that and remove the noise around it, we can see a picture of the man in front of the dolphin communicating with the dolphin. Now, not only that, this is a frozen cross-section of how they communicate with each other. The next one is a whale's frozen cross-section of their cymatic pattern. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you is a crop circle found in England. And not only is this cool because it's a crop circle, but the inside of the crop circle looks pretty similar to a cymatic pattern. Pretty wild. When something sounds good, an artist will generally feel that. When you're that dialed in, you can see the feeling. If you are not, do not worry. Those keys are being played at the same time. Those are the waves. Imagine a guitar string. This is the wave created by all three. It's called a standing wave. And here's the red wave, or the combination of the blue and the green wave. That combined wave creates pattern. That one's called a cladding pattern. You can make it with a piece of metal on a speaker. When you put sand on the metal plate, the sand falls into the valleys created by the wave. Those patterns are vital. When you simulate the pattern, you can see how it looks like a piece of paper if you're flopping it with your finger. Smart people figured out the equations, and now we can make cool 3D renders of cladding figures. And these. Those are heart cells. Acoustic bioengineering can manipulate heart cells into patterns. Those patterns can mimic the ones in heart tissue and blood vessels. So sound can literally heal your broken heart. I don't think it was that big of a secret. Ancient floor tiles from Greece and Rome mimic cymatic patterns. Nordic runes mimic cymatic patterns. I haven't paid attention to the patterns that are everywhere. When you feel good, it's just shapes lining up. There was a study done on people who attend music festivals, being called a lifeline for mental health. If you're an artist going into 2025, whether that's a doctor or a musician or anything, take your swing. You could have an ear for it. You could have an eye for it. You realize how connected it is, all of it, how easy it is to understand. You could be depriving the world of something amazing if you don't. The largest cymatics lab on Earth has been built in China, and it may be the coolest thing I've ever seen. Individual actuators on the side push the water to create any shape that they want. The place is called NMRI. It's a research institute for sea travel. Essentially, it's double bouncing the surface of the water to create peaks and valleys that can form the shapes. But the science goes way deeper than the tank of water here. Same patterns can be created with a petri dish on a speaker. The concept is called scale invariance, where things like wave phenomena can be experienced at any scale in the universe. When waves interfere with each other, they create an interference pattern. That's the same geometry you see in everything from magnetism to the quantum world. If we look very closely at the quantum patterns, you'll see that they overlap with cymatic patterns perfectly. The only difference is the perspective at which you're observing the phenomenon. In the ancient world, this was sacred geometry. Many spiritual icons have a corresponding acoustic geometry. You can encode a chant or prayer or feeling in stone by just observing the natural world that produced it. And way before we referred to our reality as a hologram, they referred to it as an illusion. We are just one slice of a multi-dimensional spectrum of overlaid interference patterns. some of which organize matter in such a way it creates an antenna for consciousness to tune into. By connecting with matter, it has a way of experiencing itself from the inside out. One song, the universe, gets split into an infinite amount of fractal patterns. The peak experience being love for how ridiculous and awesome this is at the same time. You ready for this? You're not ready for this because I wasn't ready for this. This is a normal water cymatic like this guy here, but do you see what shape it's making? The frequency is making a moving double helix. No, this is way more interesting than you think. You can make the molecular bond symmetry with a cymatic pattern. The geometry of a frequency can organize matter like the oil in the water here. So every type of DNA can be expressed using a cymatic glyph. So you can clearly see where the oil sits in those little nodes there. If you look closer, you'll see the lines that trace the cymatic pattern. They're created by these LEDs that are fixed to the end of a camera when they take the picture. You see the light bending over the pattern of the water, but if you change the color of the LEDs, the frequency literally weaves the light together into the entire pattern. This is crazy because researchers have acoustically shaped DNA to create programmable materials. All they used was piezoelectricity and sound. Scale that up to a cell. If you read the resonance of a cell using a cymoscope, its health is determined by its symmetry. If something's wrong, the shapes are off. Plants. Not only do flowers mirror cymatic patterns, gene expression and water are two of the biggest factors in the symmetry of the flower. There's a ton of research on music and frequency affecting plant growth. And as you can see here, the water carries the frequency. Craziest thing about this whole video, go to the description of this video. It says that frequency is 528 hertz. That's the same frequency in this experiment. It's like the biology is crystallizing the form of the cymatic in matter. And depending on how well the DNA resonates will determine how perfect the form is expressed. Research on this is still in its infancy, obviously. Would that not be the most insane thing ever to simulate a pattern and then see how it's expressed in a turtle shell or in a cheetah's fur? Could we change it? Is the reason why we see these patterns so much in ancient architecture because their science developed along this type of a path. It's literally the Wild West right now. It's open for discovery. But that's why I'm addicted to showing you this stuff. If you can wrap your head around that right there, I can show you how it makes everything that you see around you. This is a vortex. The concept of the vortex will make math, science, art, anything you can imagine far easier to understand. Vortexes are everywhere, from solids to liquids to gases to plasmas to sound. Everything is a vortex of some sort. That is how the wing of that plane creates the vortex that you see. If you follow me, you'll know this is the harmonic series. The harmonic series is how we perceive how waves fit inside waves in a harmonic fashion to create a vortex of sound. Your ears are literally processing a vortex of sound that enters your ear. When waves fit inside other waves nicely, this is called harmonics. This is how color works as well, and the really freaky thing is this is also how magnetic fields work. The secret to all of this is this guy right here. This is the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, and we see it on all scales, and it's very easy to make with just circles. The relativity of time is experienced through this spiral. That's why the second hand and the hour hand move at different rates. This is also how black holes modulate the experience of time. Black holes and matter are also linked through this spiral. When atoms resonate at a specific frequency, we call them an element. Atoms within our perception appear as little spheres. Humans perceive particles as spheres, but when we look closer, we just see that it's light spinning in a container. By containing that vortex, you're able to perceive the qualities of the element. Depending on what your senses are tuned to, this is going to provide you a specific experience of that vibration. You see this best in plasma, and if you contain that plasma and you can modulate the time or the frequency, then you can modulate matter. Malcolm Bendel's plasmoid unification model is how we link matter and energy together through the torus. The way we should be teaching this is nature. Nature is the best teacher, and it's the coolest thing to watch. Once you become interested in the phenomenon, you can start playing around with the frequencies. That's what musicians do. Then you can use something like cymatics to actually see what that looks like in real life. Doing this makes a connection between theory and reality. If that continues to excite you, then you could start learning the math. A frequency is just an equation of motion over time. Matter is just the behavior of this frequency in relation to time. That's E equals mc squared. Here's the coolest part. You only need to know this one thing to understand that the quantum world behaves the exact same way as the galactic world. And right in the middle happens to be right where you are, the perfect spot to learn everything you can about every world. The logical explanation for what this is an internet device, let's be real. That's the winter solstice at Stonehenge. That's the spring equinox at Angkor Wat. Chichen Itza does the cool snake thing at the equinox. Why? You only need a stick and some shadow measurements to figure these dates out. If we look at a map, the sun draws a sine wave during the solstices and a square wave during the equinoxes. This is important. I learned two things in college, and one of them was the Fourier transform that takes a sine wave and converts it to a square wave, or anything else you want, actually. Square wave's easy because Chichen Itza is a square, so why is this a circle? Well, all sine waves are actually circles. Any music producer will tell you this. The difference is how we decipher the wave. That's called protocol. Protocol is the way that different brands and technology interpret the signal. Another method of sending signal is light, like fiber optics use. Let's imagine that each one of these spinning balls creates a vortex of light. Each specific star represents a constellation that uses a different protocol. One could be circles. This one here could be squares. Wave has to be interpreted like this oscilloscope is interpreting that audio wave. If you have the right math, you can draw anything with a wave. Like music, that has a lot going on though. Cymatics can visualize pure sine or square wave tones. A bunch of shapes that represents a sound, then we have an alphabet. If everything is vibrating and everyone uses the same language, just a different protocol or connector. High voltage, quartz, something crazy happens. It just goes right around that rock. Quartz is mostly silicon, so are computer chips because it's a great insulator. Granite, on the other hand, little resistance, but mostly runs right through. Now, pyrite, conductive mineral, fool's gold, plasma, does not care. It goes straight through, consensually. A mineral like quartz does not care. It already has voltage in it. When you smack it, it produces it. Now, the discharge pattern of plasma gets reflected in conductive materials like these ball bearings suspended in oil. Once it finds the ground, it starts to look strikingly similar to an organism. Do not do this ever. Just don't do this. But high voltage through a human body creates an ion wind you can direct with your finger like a wizard. Again, just don't try this, but high voltage through water can wirelessly transfer power. Yes. Why would you want to do that? Just bear with me here. Plasma is 99.9% of the visible universe. It acts almost like a conscious entity. When you contain it, you can create nuclear fusion, which is a potential future source of power. Probably not, though, because of plasmoids. Symmetrically compressing some charged gas in water facilitates a nuclear reaction. This is currently being used to run a car with zero emissions. Check out Jordan's channel if you want to build one of them. This is what they look like. It's the geometry of plasma, and that's what it looks like in 2D. A super excited gas is literally rewriting our understanding of physics. It gets weirder. This is from alchemy, the ancient precursor to modern science. That engine runs on lightning. It is surprisingly simple. You have to check this out. So this is called the thunderstorm generator because in a thunderstorm, a hot rising vortex and a cold vortex meet and they create electricity. But that is too much and too chaotic. This guy creates a mini thunderstorm in the ball. There's like 3 parts. Stay with me. The first one is an ionizing chamber, like the sun uses to ionize water molecules in the clouds. That ionized water goes down into a bubbler. It doesn't make big bubbles, it makes very small microscopic baby bubbles. Baby bubbles are super excited and then they go into the sphere. It is actually a sphere within a sphere, and those bubbles go in one end and the exhaust comes in the other end. The opposing spins create a separation of charge, pressure, and temperature. That is what it looks like. As the bubble guys enter, they spin and expand. Then as they go out, they get symmetrically contracted really hard, and then they release energy when that happens. Same thing that happens in lightning and sonoluminescence. This process is called hydrodynamic shear, or we could call it baking donuts if anyone is on board with that. That energy is used to transmute harmful gases into breathable atmospheric oxygen. Those bubbles collapse, it breaks apart all the elements and electrons. The central plasmoid then rebuilds everything into new elements. This is what they look like on the inside of one of those metal balls. This process is called transmutation, can be used to make new elements, or it can be used as fuel. All you have to do is replace spark plugs with plasmoid plugs, and you can even make an implosion cylinder to get more horsepower. Any motor running on carbon-based fuels can be retrofit with one of these. It can also be used commercially and at power plants. Alchemical Science has full DIY builds as well. Many of us were waiting on the data for this, and now that it's back, I'm very happy to say that I will be teaching the hell out of it.